Good morning. I would like to call the Assembly Committee on Ways and Means and Senate Committee on Finance subcommittees on K through 12 higher education CIP to order. We have a few budget closings for recommendations to the whole committee on our agenda, including Legislative Branch, Legislative Council Bureau, State Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, Treasurer's Office, and Department of Administration when it comes to the capital improvement programs. At the end of our agenda, we will always have public comment, and folks can feel free to call in at the end of our meeting for public comment by dialing 888-475-4499. And when prompted, the meeting ID today is 898-791-43412, and then you press the number sign, and then when prompted for the participant ID, you also press the number sign. We would, of course, limit public comment to 2 minutes. And with that, I would like to welcome up Interim Director Thornton and her team to start the Capital Improvement Program presentation for the... Oh, thank you. I will start with roll call, and we'll begin.
Senators Canizaro, Neal, Buck, Stone, Dondero Loop, Assembly Members Hayfen, Howdigi, Koenig, Monroe Moreno, O'Neill, Torres Fawcett, Yeager, and Chair Backus.
And I am present, and please mark Assembly Member O'Neill present when he arrives. We have bill presentations going on in other committees, and so some of our members may be stepping out at different times. So welcome, Interim Director Thornton, and feel free to begin on the Capital Improvement Program when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Committee, and happy May Day. Diane Thornton, Legislative Council Bureau for the record. The legislative branch's funding requests in one shots were discussed in subcommittee on March 21st. The total funding request for the legislative department is approximately $233.8 million. As detailed in the presentation in March, improvements to the legislative building are critical to ensuring the continuity of government. Some of the most pressing needs involve basic safety, seismic retrofitting, asbestos abatement, fire and safety suppression. In addition, the building's HVAC and electrical distribution systems have reached their end of life. The phone system is obsolete and no longer serviceable. Constructing a new office building to replace the current Sedway office building is an essential part of serving the needs of the legislature. It has significant deferred maintenance needs and does not provide the adequate space or infrastructure for our modern legislative workforce. And finally, we're proposing the construction of a new parking structure to accommodate the needs of staff, legislator, and visitors. To fund the capital improvement projects, you'll see on page 2 of the memo, the LCB recommends general fund appropriations of approximately $33.8 million related to capital improvements and operation projects. In addition, the LCB recommends the balance of $191.9 million to be financed through the issuance of general obligation bonds. The LCB also recommends a one-time general fund appropriation totaling $7.1 over the biennium related to information technology services and operations. And lastly, dues for registration costs to national organizations of approximately $1.1 million. Thank you, Madam Chair. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you so much. Members, do we have any questions for Ms. Thornton? With that, I would entertain a motion.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I would move to recommend the approval of the general fund appropriations of $33.9 million and the issuance of general obligation bonds totaling $191.9 million for total financing of $225.7 million to fund the capital improvement projects of the legislative branch as outlined on page 2 of the memo from Director Thornton, Additionally, I move to recommend approval of the general fund appropriations of $8.1 million for legislative department information technology projects and equipment, and dues and registration costs for national organizations as outlined on page 2 of the memo from Director Thornton, and that this appropriation be included in the 2025 Appropriations Act.
I have a first from Chair Dondero Loop. Do I have a second? Second. I have a second from Majority Leader Howdigy. Is there any discussion on the motion? I will go to Assemblymember Hafen.
Thank you, Chair. And I understand most of this is bonds, and it is very important. I would have preferred to have deferred this to the full committee, just knowing that the economic forum numbers are coming out today. I'm going to be a very soft no today, but just want to see the economic forum numbers, and hopefully they're better than anticipated, and it'll be very easy when we get to the full committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, do we have any other further discussion on the motion? With that, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. I have a no from Assemblymember Hafen and a no from Senator Buck, and also a no from Senator Stone. The motion carries. Thank you so much, and thank you so much, Director Thornton. We'll go ahead and move to our next item on our agenda regarding the Conservation and Natural Resources Bond Program, and I'll go ahead and turn it over to our staff, Mr. Luna.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Justin Luna for the record. Good morning, members of the subcommittee. I'll be I'll be walking you through the general obligation bond programs that are managed by the State Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, DCNR. DCNR administers 4 resource protection programs that are funded through general obligation bonds. The Conservation Bond Program, the Lake Tahoe Environmental Improvement Program, or EIP, the Cultural Centers and Historic Preservation Grant Program, and the Water Infrastructure Grant Program. The amounts recommended fall within the General Obligation, Debt Capacity, and Affordability Report issued by the State Treasurer's Office. And these 4 programs were heard by the subcommittee on April 2nd. On page 4 of your packet, the first is the Conservation Bond Program. The executive budget recommends the issuance of $63.4 million in general obligation bonds for the Conservation Bond Program, also known as Conserve Nevada. During a pre-session hearing of the Legislative Commission's Budget Subcommittee on January 29, 2025, the agency shared a tentative plan for distribution of the recommended $63.4 million for the Conserve Nevada bond programs, and that breakdown is on the middle of page 5 for reference. The Conserve Nevada program requires 10% matching funding for any approved projects, with many of the awarded partners contributing well beyond the match requirement, which multiplies the impact of the projects across the state, according to the agency. The decision for the subcommittee near the bottom of page 5, does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of the governor's recommended issuances of general obligation bonds of $63.4 million over the 2025-27 biennium for the State Department of Conservation and Natural Resources Conservation Bond Program?
Thank you so much. I'll go ahead and accept a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I would move to approve as read by staff.
Thank you so much. I have a first from Chair Dondero Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdigy. Is there any discussion on the motion? With that, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries unanimously for those present.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next bond program managed by DCNR begins at the bottom of page 5, the Lake Tahoe Environmental Improvement Program. The executive budget recommends the issuance of $23 million in general obligation bonds for the Lake Tahoe EIP program. However, the Division of State Lands has since requested to reduce the amount of the issuance to $10.5 million due to a delay in one of the planned projects. The Division of State Lands is responsible for coordinating the development and implementation of Nevada's share of projects, cooperation with other state agencies. Projects are managed by the Nevada Tahoe Resource Team, consisting of staff from the DCNR divisions of state lands, state parks, and forestry, and also the State Department of Wildlife. During the budget hearing, the agency clarified the amount of general obligation bonds needed over the 2025-27 biennium to fund environmental improvement projects in the Lake Tahoe Basin is $10.5 million. Senate Bill 83, as amended, acts as enabling legislation to authorize the issuances. The bill has been re-referred to Senate Committee on Finance. The decision for the subcommittee on page 7 of your packet. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of the issuance of general obligation bonds totaling $10.5 million over the 2025-27 biennium for the Lake Tahoe Environmental Improvement Program based on the revised plan identified by the DCNR Division of State Lands, contingent upon the passage and approval of enabling legislation?
Thank you so much, Mr. Luna. Do we have any questions for our staff regarding this decision? If not, I'll go ahead and accept a motion.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I would move to approve as read by staff.
We have a first from Chair Dondera Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdigy. Is there any discussion on the motion? With that, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries with those present.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Justin Luna again for the record. The next bond program is on page 7. The executive budget recommends the issuance of $6 million in general obligation bonds for the Cultural Centers and Historic Preservation Grant Program. NRS limits the issuance of general obligation bonds not to exceed $3 million per year to fund historic preservation projects. During the budget hearing, the agency indicated the bond issuances would be allocated through a competitive grant process. The decision for the subcommittee on page 8. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of the governor's recommended issuances of general obligation bonds of $3 million in each fiscal year of the 2025-27 biennium for the Cultural Centers and Historic Preservation Grant Program?
Thank you so much. Do we have any questions for our staff regarding this item? If not, I'll go ahead and take a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I move to approve as read by staff.
Thank you so much. I have a first from Chair Dondera Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdigy. Is there any discussion on the motion? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Justin Luna for the record. The final bond program managed by DCNR is on page 8. The executive budget recommends the issuance of $33.9 million in general obligation bonds for the Water Infrastructure Grant Program. And these projects are awarded by the Board for Financing Water Projects. During the budget hearing, the agency indicated that these funds are often leveraged with federal and local funding to fully finance the planning and construction of large water capital improvement projects. The decision for the subcommittee on page 9. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of the governor's recommended issuances of general obligation bonds of $33.9 million over the 2025-27 biennium for the Water Infrastructure Grant Program?
Thank you so much. Do we have any questions regarding the Water Infrastructure Grant Program? If not, I'll take a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I move to approve as read by staff.
Thank you so much. I have a first from Chair Dondera Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdigy. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries. And thank you so much, Mr. Luna. We'll take a little brief break so we can allow our staff to switch. as ready as ever. We'll go back on the record, and I'll turn it over to staff to walk us through our next closing item for capital. Actually, it's for the Treasurer's Office, Nevada State Infrastructure Bank bonds, bond interest and redemption.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Adam Dross with the LCB Fiscal Analysis Division. Today, I'll be walking the subcommittee through the closing document for the Nevada State Infrastructure Bank, the general obligation bond closing. And this can be found on page 11 of your packet. And this was heard by the subcommittee on February 20th. The governor recommends $150 million in general obligation bonds for the Nevada State Infrastructure Bank, which is administered by the State Treasurer's Office. This would be used to fund two purposes. The first is $75 million for the Community Infrastructure Grant Program to support rural housing and statewide economic development. An additional $75 million would be provided to provide loans and other financial assistance to qualified borrowers to support eligible projects for bank funding as defined in Chapter 226 of Nevada Revised Statutes. As background, the 2021 legislature authorized the issuance of $75 million in general obligation bonds, and over the 2023-24 interim, the bank issued loans totaling $74.5 million for various projects. The general obligation bonds recommended by the governor would be repaid through the state's property tax collections, consistent with the prior bond funding of $75 million. And the Office of the State Treasurer indicates the bond sale would occur in fall 2025. Regarding the bond funding of $75 million for the Community Infrastructure Grant Program, the governor recommends this funding would be provided for grants or forgivable loans to qualified borrowers to support rural housing projects. The governor's proposed Economic Development Policy Reform Act, which was introduced yesterday as Senate Bill 461, would provide the framework for this program. According to staff from the Governor's Office of Economic Development, or GOED, it would establish a community infrastructure grant program to award funding, accrue interest, and would be a non-reverting account. This account would be used to award grants to entities to facilitate the expansion or relocation of businesses within the state and address a critical housing shortage in rural areas. GOED would not use more than 50% of the total funds allocated in the account to provide grants to rural housing projects, and rural is defined as counties whose population is less than 100,000 or an incorporated city whose population is less than 60,000. Turning to page 12, qualified entities would be regional development authorities, local governments seeking financial assistance, as well as entities which have executed an agreement with a local government for the development of a rural housing project. This funding would be used to construct rural housing projects as well as qualified infrastructure projects such as utility infrastructure, transportation infrastructure, or the acquisition of land or site preparation. GOED must consult with the Department of Business and Industry's Housing Division and local governments to establish an application process with the application detailed provided in the bullets on page 12. I would note if a project is part of a revenue-producing enterprise, it would not be eligible for this funding. GOED, in coordination with the Nevada State Infrastructure Bank Boards of Directors, would monitor project progress, require regular reporting, and conduct audits, and the office indicates that it would also have a clawback provision. I would note GOED indicates the governor's proposed legislation is intended to provide a $25 million for the Community Infrastructure Grant Program account, and that would be the first source of funding to be used for the program. However, that general fund appropriation will be considered along with the SB 461 funding. So the decision for the subcommittee can be found on page 13. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend the issuance of general obligation bonds of $75 million for the Nevada State Infrastructure Bank to provide forgivable loans through the Community Infrastructure Grant Program, contingent upon the passage and approval of Bill Draft Request 32-1070, which is Senate Bill 461, or other enabling legislation? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. Members, do we have any questions for our staff? With that, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion. Oh, I'm sorry. I have a comment from Chair Monroe Marino.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just some clarifications. When we started the infrastructure bank, and it has done some amazing work on projects across the state. We started with the 75 million, and those dollars get repaid back into the bank, right?
Madam Chair, through you to Assemblymember Monroe Moreno, that is correct. The principal origination payments, interest earnings, all cycle back to the bank for to be used for further loans.
So the request before us today, this would be an additional 75 on top of that and the interest that money would bring back in.
Correct. This first tranche of dollars would be used for this program for an additional $75 million. And again, this would be forgivable loans for this first tranche of dollars. So no repayments generally.
Madam Chair, just one last thing. We know that we have the economic forum later today, and if we were to not approve this item today, we still have SB 461 where those dollars could be added if we find that we're able to utilize more bonds and maybe save some general fund dollars. Could we address this in that bill at that time? And that would be after economic forum when we have a better idea of where we're at.
Thank you so much. Let me also go to Senator Canizero.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think, obviously, what's being presented to us today is to make a decision about allocating bonding capacity through the infrastructure bank as it relates to Senate Bill 461, and then I think some additional conversations relating to the assembly bill that the governor has pertaining to housing. I think there are many ongoing discussions about what may happen with those two bills, where we may end up. And so I think it is a bit premature at this point to approve this, not knowing where those bills stand, especially because Senate Bill 461 was just introduced and referred to committee yesterday on the Senate side. So I think that it would be prudent for us, and sort of piggybacking on Chair Monroe Moreno's comments, in light of the economic forum, to not approve this particular item, allow for those conversations to happen with respect to Senate Bill 461 and with respect to the governor's housing bill, to see where we end up as it relates to some of these ongoing proposals, and then be able to make those decisions as we address that legislation separately.
Thank you so much. And with that, I'll go to Speaker Yeager.
Thank you so much, Chair. I just wanted to, note that I agree with those comments. I don't think this decision should be seen as a no. It really is a deferral until we get a little bit more information about how those other two bills that the governor is proposing are going to play out. And as the Senate Majority Leader noted, one of them just got introduced yesterday, and so discussions are still ongoing with the governor on those. And I also do have some concerns that I think are shared by my colleagues, that how exactly forgivable loans from the infrastructure bank would work when we're talking about bonding capacity, and what impact on the state that may have. So those questions, I think, are being worked on, and they're unresolved at the moment. So I agree with the notion that we ought to not approve this, but continue discussions, and we have other vehicles to do this if we decide that that is the right thing to do for the state. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. And I think I have a comment also from Assemblymember Haven.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to disclose that I do operate a water and sewer company. This section of these loans does deal with extension of utility infrastructure. However, it is my understanding that this is for government agencies, GIDs, et cetera, and therefore I will be participating, but I did want to just disclose that on the record. Thank you.
Thank you for that disclosure. And I think we do need a motion on that item.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And with the previous comments, I would move to not approve the issuance of general obligation bonds of $75 million for the Nevada State Infrastructure Bank to provide forgivable loans through the Community Infrastructure Grant Program, contingent upon the passage and approval of SB 461 or other enabling legislation.
I have a first from Chair Dondero Loop. Do I have a second? I have a second from Majority Leader Howdigy. Is there any discussion on the motion? With that, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. I have a no from Senator Buck, and the motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The second item is bond funding of $75 million for eligible bank projects. The office indicates this remaining $75 million would be utilized to provide loans and other financial assistance to qualified borrowers to support eligible projects for bank funding. Pursuant to Chapter 226 of NRS, this could be used for transportation facilities, utility infrastructure, or infrastructure related to economic development, among other items. In the 2023-24 interim, the bank provided funding totaling $74.5 million, which is provided on page 13, the table on page 13 of your packet. And this is broken down by various project categories, including affordable housing, K-12 school facilities, social infrastructure, and utility infrastructure, with the percentage of total funding provided on the right of that table. I would note that pursuant to NRS 226 allows the bank to provide loans without review or approval by the legislature or the interim finance committee. However, during the budget hearing on February 20th, the state treasurer's office indicated the subcommittee could provide its prioritization regarding how this funding should be utilized if approved. Fiscal staff has provided the bullets on page 14 laying out the various categories of funding if the subcommittee so wishes to provide that direction to the office. So the decision for the subcommittee can be found on page 14 of your packet, and that is A, does the subcommittee wish to recommend the issuance of general obligation bonds of $75 million over the 2025-27 biennium for the Nevada State Infrastructure Bank to provide funding for eligible projects as defined in NRS 226.715, and B, if the issuance of general obligation bonds is recommended for approval, does the subcommittee also wish to recommend priorities for the allocation of this funding? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Mr. Drost. Do we have any discussion or questions for Mr. Drost regarding this item? I'll go to Assemblymember Hafen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just want to make the same disclosure that I do operate a water sewer company, and it is my understanding that these funds are not available, so therefore I will be voting in the matter. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Members, do we have any other comments? I know this kind of follows in line still with looking at other bills, but I'll go to Chair Monroe Marino.
And Madam Chair, I do agree with you on that, and maybe this is something that should be discussed later at full committee. And as we look at the list of priorities, I know as I looked over the highlights and was studying them, I'd like to see a little bit more oversight from the IFC as we move forward with it, but perhaps it's something we not approve today, but readdress at the full committee. Just a thought.
Do we have any other comments? I'll go to Majority Leader Canizero.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think that because there are many moving pieces on this, including the fact that we've been sitting in these subcommittees and in full committee talking about how we are trying to maintain current programming, cutting new and expanding programs, positions, projects. To me, where I think there needs to be some more conversation, especially knowing the previous discussion on the 75 million as it relates to Senate Bill 461. This additional 75 million, while I understand our general obligation bonds that would fall into the infrastructure bank, is money that would be allotted to the infrastructure bank for currently unknown projects. For us, I think to allot that money where we sit right this moment, I think there's still a lot of questions, because if we can use that to shift bonding capacity for some of these other projects that I think we're going to talk about today, from some of the other CIP that we have been doing, and that frees up general fund that allows us to continue current ongoing programs in light of what I think we'll know more today after the economic forum, what our revenues look like. To me, it's difficult to say yes to bonds for projects that are yet to be determined. when we could use that capacity for current ongoing CIP, free up some general fund, and allow us to better stabilize some of the things that we have in all of these subcommittees talked about, either cutting some money from or not expanding where we know that there are needs in Nevada. So I would agree with Chair Monroe Moreno that I think there's some ongoing discussion, but I think that the crux for this committee, and where I don't know that I would be comfortable approving this today, and maybe we can have a fuller discussion with the full committee, is that if we allocate these, we are missing an opportunity to allow for some additional general funds to go to ongoing programs that we continue to have conversations about cutting. And maybe today's information from the Economic Forum is more positive than what may be expected, in which case that makes this decision easier. But for me, I'm struggling with where we are in terms of approving things in this committee and then now issuing additional bonds for yet to be determined projects and not freeing up that general fund.
Thank you so much. I think, seeing no further questions, I will go ahead and accept a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would make the motion to not approve the general obligation bonds of $75 million over the 25-27 biennium for the Nevada State Infrastructure Bank to provide funding for eligible projects. And I would also not make a motion to not approve the general obligation bonds as recommended for approval.
Thank you so much. Do I have a second? So I have a first from Chair Daldera Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdigy. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries. And we will have a little brief break. Oh, do we need a little brief break to substitute staff for the next item? Okay, we're ready to go back to our next account 3951082 regarding treasure bond interest and redemption, and I'll turn it over to our staff.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. Julie Waller from the Fiscal Analysis Division for the record. The first closing item is the Treasurer's Bond Interest and Redemption Bond Fund Budget Account. This budget account is funded primarily through the 17-cent ad valorem property tax levy, and this provides for debt service for the general obligation bonds issued by the state. This levy is included in the legislation for the capital improvement program. This budget account was heard by the subcommittee on February 20th. There are no major closing issues, and there are 7 other closing items. I would point out item number 6 is a base budget technical adjustment, and this adjustment would be to align the revenues, the property tax revenues that are recommended in the governor's budget with the projected property tax revenues that are included in the state treasurer's debt capacity and affordability report. And that technical adjustment would result in an increase of $5.5 million in fiscal year 2026 and $22.2 million in fiscal year 2027. This technical adjustment presented does not have any impact on the identified affordability to issue general obligation bonds in the upcoming biennium. The second other closing item of note is a request by the Office of the State Treasurer to continue language that has been included in the past in the 2025 CIP bill. And this would allow for work program revisions to be requested and approved through the Governor's Finance Office for this budget account without requiring approval by the Interim Finance Committee for budgetary revisions that are necessary for the purpose of bond repayment costs. And again, as mentioned, this similar language was included in Section 22 of AB 1 of the 34th 2023 special session. And this request appears reasonable to staff. So fiscal staff recommends other closing items 1 through 5 be closed as recommended by the governor, and other closing items 6 be closed with a noted technical adjustment to base budget revenue. Fiscal staff also recommends the inclusion of language in the capital improvement program bill, as noted under other closing item 7, and requests authority for staff to make other technical adjustments as necessary.
Thank you so much. Members, do we have any questions for our staff regarding this decision? With that, I'll go ahead and take a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I move to approve as read by staff.
Second. I have a first from Chair Dondero Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdiggy. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries. We'll go to our next item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We will now move on to the recommended 2025 capital improvement program. There are 72 projects recommended, and these were all heard in various budget hearings on February 20th, March 18th, and April 2nd. This document provides a high-level summary of the projects included in the Governor's recommended 2025 CIP, based on testimony provided during the Joint Subcommittee and the K-12 hearings on February 20th, March 18th, and April 2nd. Any resulting change in the project funding and/or scope of work for individual projects is identified on an attachment, Attachment A. That's a separate legal size document which outlines every project, the funding source, and a brief description of what that project is. So the closing document has been structured to address and provide general information followed by details of individual project recommendations, and these are grouped by project type, which are the construction projects, the planning projects, maintenance projects, statewide projects, and additional details and further explanation of the changes will be addressed during the closing discussion of each type of CIP project. So the first item on page 19 for discussion are the funding changes that have occurred since the time that the subcommittee has heard these various projects. And I would point out that the Governor's Finance Office submitted budget amendments on February 3rd, March 18th, to the Governor's recommended 2025 CIP, as well as a request to revise the project cost estimate and to increase the square footage for a facility recommended in CIP Project 25P06, and this was received on April 11th. The amendments, including the cost estimate sheets for the added and the revised projects, are provided as attachments, Attachment C and Attachment D, for reference at the end of the closing packet. Funding recommendations for consideration by the subcommittee and the recommended 2025 CIP are summarized in Attachment B, and they have been adjusted for the various changes submitted through the budget amendments. So turning to that attachment, we can walk through some of the changes that have occurred since the subcommittee heard these projects. The first item is, I would point out that the Governor's recommended 2025 CIP was initially recommended at $1.128 billion, and with the additional adjustments and changes submitted through the Governor's Finance Office, the revised recommendation is now at $1.157 billion, and that's an increase of $29.2 million. In terms of the funding source changes, the first one is the elimination of $1.4 million in unexpended general fund appropriations from earlier CIPs to be reallocated to the 2025 CIP as originally recommended by the Governor, and this was due to updated projections. Through a budget amendment submitted on February 3rd. There's an additional $7.5 million in general fund appropriations recommended to support the expansion of CIP Project 25C26, and this would be to purchase 3 intermediate care facility buildings to relocate patients from the Department of Health and Human Services West Charleston Boulevard campus. The next modification is a reduction of $27,390 in general fund appropriations, and this is CIP Project 25P06, as well as the aforementioned scope modification to increase the planned facility square footage in this project. And this request was received on April 11th. There was an additional elimination of $23.9 million of in bond proceeds from earlier CIPs that was originally recommended in the governor's 2025 CIP, and this is also due to updated projections. Lastly, there was an additional project, and this was submitted as a budget amendment on March 18th, and this is CIP Project 25C29, and this would add $16 million in general obligation bonds and $5.7 million in federal funds for a total cost of $21.7 million to add CIP Project C29. So the net change, again, was the $29.2 million. However, there is a funding shortfall with these changes, with the elimination of those reallocated bond proceeds and general fund appropriation, former unexpended general fund appropriations, and that leaves a shortfall at this time of $25.3 million to fund the 72 projects that are recommended in the governor's revised 2025 CIP. And as I mentioned, this reconciliation is provided for the subcommittee on Attachment B. The Governor's Finance Office indicated it was working with the Office of the State Treasurer to analyze the availability of additional bond affordability to fund this shortfall. However, as of today, we have not received a response from the Governor's Finance Office regarding a budget amendment to address the $25.3 million funding shortfall. Depending on the recommendations of the CIP projects recommended for approval by the subcommittee, there may or may not be sufficient resources to fund the 2025 CIP as revised. However, at this time, we're unable to tell that until we consider all of the recommendations of the subcommittee. However, on the middle of page 20, there are some options for consideration. Once we determine what the recommendations are, if there is a shortfall, and we will bring that information back to the full committee. The bottom of page 20 is just identifying the new project that was discussed earlier that was added to a budget amendment. And then moving to the top of page 21, the budget amendment submitted on March 18th also requested approval to cancel Project CIP Project 23C33, and this is the Southern Nevada Small Arms Range for the Nevada Army National Guard, and this was initially funded with bond proceed or general obligation bonds of $17 million. And the reason for this cancellation was that there was an update to Army regulations, and the location of the selected site for the proposed small arms range was not aligned to the new standard. And as such, the Office of the Military is working to secure federal funds to develop an arms range at the Hawthorne Army Depot. So does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of the cancellation of CIP Project 23C33 as recommended in the budget amendment submitted on March 18, 2025?
Thank you so much. Do we have any questions for our staff regarding this decision item? With that, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I would move to approve as read by staff.
Thank you so much. We have a first from Chair Dondero Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdegi. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next item is on page 21, and this is the request for project extensions. This was first mentioned at the April 2nd budget hearing, And there are 20 projects, 2 from the 2019 CIP and 18 from the 2021 CIP. And if a project is not completed or anticipated that it will not be completed within the 4 years that the funding is available for the CIP projects, the legislature can grant an extension for individual projects, which is facilitated through the biennial CIP legislation. And typically, these projects extensions are granted for a 2-year period. Reasonable extension requests include delays in project completion, dependencies on outside entities, time to complete a warranty period, and other unforeseen circumstances. And again, the bulleted list provides identifies the projects that have been requested for an extension for a 2-year period. And at this time, fiscal staff has reviewed these items, and it appears reasonable requests to fiscal staff. Does this subcommittee wish to recommend approval of language in the CIP legislation that would approve the 2-year project extensions requested by the State Public Works Division for the identified 2 projects that were legislatively approved in the 2019 CIP and the 18 projects that were legislatively approved in the 2021 CIP?
Thank you so much. Members, do we have any questions for staff regarding this item? With that, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I would move to approve as read by staff.
Thank you so much. We have a first from Chair Dondero Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdicky. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Julie Waller again for the record. So we will now turn to the CIP projects that are recommended in the 2025, Governor's recommended 2025 CIP. And the first type of project is the construction projects. There are 20 construction projects totaling $832.8 million, of which 2 of the largest projects are total $605 million. The major construction projects are presented with individual closing decision for the subcommittee's consideration. Following these individual discussions is a grouping of other construction projects that, if desired, can be considered and have a collective motion taken for closing recommendations. So the first project is 25C01 Southern Nevada Forensic Facility in Las Vegas. The governor recommends $381.8 million in general obligation bonds to construct a 300-bed psychiatric facility for forensic patients on the existing campus of the West Charleston, DHHS campus on West Charleston in Las Vegas. And this would be a continuation of CIP Project 23P06, which was the advanced planning for this project. The new forensic facility would serve individuals awaiting adjudication and needing treatment to competency and would also support long-term commitments. As was discussed previously in the budget hearing for this project, the Division of Public and Behavioral Health is statutorily required to provide forensic psychiatric hospital services pursuant to Chapter 178 of the NRS. Case law requires that patients be admitted to this service within 7 days of a court ordering the service. The existing facilities providing this service, Lakes Crossing Center in Sparks and the Stein Forensic Facility in Las Vegas, are at or beyond capacity. The Division of Public and Behavioral Health is currently sanctioned daily fines through imposed by the 8th Judicial Court for the division's inability to meet its statutory obligation. The division must pay $500 a day for each criminal defendant whose transfer to a psychiatric facility is delayed beyond 7 days. If approved, the State Public Works Division anticipates the design would be completed in September 2025. Construction could commence in August of 2026, and the project would be anticipated to be completed in March of 2029 with an opening of August of 2029. During the budget hearing, the agency did confirm that the approval of CIP Project 2501 would be contingent upon the approval of the next CIP project, and that's 25C02, in order to provide the land needed to build the new forensic facility. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 25C01 as reflected on the closing document, contingent upon the subcommittee's recommended approval of CIP Project 25C02?
Thank you so much. Is there any questions for our staff regarding this item? With that, I will go ahead and entertain a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I would move to approve as read by staff.
Thank you so much. We have a first from Chair Dondero Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdigy. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next project for consideration is 25CO2 Desert Regional Center Facilities in Las Vegas. The governor recommends $38 million in general obligation bonds to design and construct replacement buildings at the Desert Regional Center in Las Vegas. The project would replace aging buildings that have reached their end of useful life and provide the land necessary to support the construction of the former new 300-bed forensic facility project that was formerly discussed. The project, this project would include the demolition of buildings 1300, 1304, and 1391, and would allow the new forensic facility to be built as a low-rise structure, which would lower the overall cost of the project. The replacement buildings would include an administrative building, an administrative care facility, and a therapy building, and providing these new buildings would alleviate the safety and maintenance concerns and support updated therapy and resident models. During the budget hearing, or following the budget hearing, the State Public Works Division clarified the timeline for the project, CIP Project 25C01, and offered a corrected timeline for this project. Accordingly, the corrected timeline for this project would be design completion in April 2025, construction commencement September 2025, and completion in September of 2026 if approved. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 25C02 as reflected on the closing document?
Thank you so much. Do we have any questions regarding the Desert Regional Center Facilities CIP? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and take a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I would move to approve as read by staff.
We have a first from Chair Dondero Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdigy. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next project is 25C03 North Las Vegas State Veterans Home. The governor recommends total funding of $223.2 million, consisting of $78.1 million in general obligation bonds and $145.1 million in federal funds to construct a 128-bed, 156,700 square foot, single occupancy skilled nursing facility for veterans in North Las Vegas. The agency indicates the need for 649 beds in skilled nursing facilities in Nevada, and currently there are 276 beds in operation. This leaves an unmet need of 373 beds. The construction of this project would add 128 beds to the total number of operational beds for veterans. The 2023 legislature approved $15.5 million to complete the advanced planning through construction documents for a 128-bed single occupancy skilled nursing facility. The recommended construction project for the home does not include the funding for furniture, fixtures, and equipment, and the division indicates this would be requested in the 2027 CIP. As noted earlier, this project includes authority of $145.1 million in federal funds anticipated to be awarded through the federal government. The division confirms that no work would be started until the federal grant is awarded. During the budget hearing, a question came up as to whether or not a general fund advance would be required for this project, and since follow-up information indicates that since both the bond and the federal funding sources would be available when construction commences, the division confirms there would be no need for a general fund advance. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 25C03 as reflected on the closing document?
Thank you so much. Members, do we have any questions regarding this decision? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and take a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I would move as read by staff.
Thank you so much. I have a first from Chair Dondero Loop. I have a second from Majority Leader Howdegi. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries. We can move on to our next CIP item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next project is 25C05, and this is a request for additional funds for Hobart Reservoir Dam rehabilitation at the Lake Water System. The governor recommends $4.6 million in general obligation bonds to provide additional funding to complete CIP Project 21C06, Hobart Reservoir Dam rehabilitation, to construct structural and functional upgrades to the Hobart Reservoir Dam. This would include a seismic evaluation, upgrades to protect against seismic events, and the replacement of discharge piping and outlet valves. Due to a delay in receiving grant approval and extensive permitting required by the federal grant, construction has been delayed to the summer of 2026, and as a result, the cost to complete the project have increased. The division anticipates completing the required project permitting in the summer of 2025. On April 7th, the division notified fiscal staff that the $10 million federal grant was a FEMA federal grant for CIP Project 21C06, which had been awarded by FEMA, was canceled. According to the division, FEMA is ending the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities program and canceling all applications from fiscal years 2020 to 2023 if grant funds have not been distributed to states. As of April 29th, the Governor's Finance Office has not provided any communication or submitted a budget amendment to address the loss of the $10 million in federal grant funds for this project, for Project 21C06. As such, it's unclear what the status of Project 21C06 and the need for Project 25C05 is. The subcommittee may wish to ask the Governor's Finance Office or the State Public Works Division to provide a status update on the funding shortfall to assist the subcommittee in determining whether to recommend approval of additional state funding for the dam reservoir project through Project CIP Project 25C05. And I would note that this is a critical project. The last upgrades to this dam were in the 1950s when there was a breach and there were a couple of fatalities.
Thank you so much. Members, do we have any questions regarding this project? With that, give us a moment for our motion. I'll go ahead and take a motion from Chair Dondero Loop.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So I would move to approve CIP Project 25C05 with the $4.6 million plus the $10 million to replace the money lost with the federal government, and ask staff to continue to monitor and look at the FEMA accounts and that $10 million. Thank you.
Thank you so much. With that, I would go ahead and take a second. I'll take a second from Majority Leader Howdegi. Is there any discussion on the motion? I'll go to Assemblymember Hafen.
Just for clarification on the motion, the additional 10 million is going to be from general obligation bonds and not from the general fund, correct?
Thank you so much, Assemblymember Hafen, for that question. Yes, the intent is that we're going to use bonding to cover the $10 million that FEMA pulled from this project. And then hopefully, if there ever becomes funds available from FEMA, that hopefully that could go to this project. But it looks like it's probably slim on that, but that is the intent. With that, any other discussion on the motion? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries, and we can go to our next project.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The very next project is 25C12 Youth Mental Health Intake Building at Summit View Youth Center in Las Vegas. The governor recommends $5.5 million in general obligation bonds to design and construct a youth intake building and 3 support buildings for the Summit View Youth Center in Las Vegas. The new intake unit would perform a screening and assessment function, but not a treatment function for, and also I would clarify that during the budget hearing, the department clarified that the new intake building would not provide an additional treatment facility for mentally disordered, disturbed, or mentally disabled youth as described in the CIP project cost estimate sheet, but rather it would be for youth that are adjudicated to the Summit View Youth Center. On April 30th, the Joint Subcommittee on Health and Human Services did not approve funding for staff and operating expenses for the intake center, and so it's unclear then if this facility would be needed during this biennium. So the decision for the subcommittee is, does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 25C12 as recommended on the closing document?
Thank you so much. Do we have any questions regarding this project? With that, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I would move to not approve this CIP Project 25C12 as reflected on the closing document.
I have a first from Chair Dondera Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdigi. Is there any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries, and we can go to 25-C14.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Julie Waller again for the record. And this project is the seismic stabilization and rehabilitation of the old gym at the Stewart facility in Carson City. The governor recommends $16.6 million in general obligation bonds to construct the structural, seismic stabilization, and architectural interior rehabilitation for the old gym at the Stewart facility. This, the Stewart Old Gym is an unreinforced stone structure and is very susceptible to damage or collapse from earthquakes. The project would provide significant structural upgrades for improved life safety. This would be a continuation of a couple of prior CIP projects, and that was the Project 17C09, which was a roof replacement and roof seismic stabilization, as well as CIP Project 23P09, which it was the advanced planning for this construction project. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 25C14 as reflected on the closing document?
Thank you so much. Any questions on this project? Seeing none, I'll take a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I would move to approve as read by staff.
Thank you so much. I have a first from Chair Dondera Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdigi. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Julie Waller for the record. The next project is 25C26, State Office Buildings Purchase and Improvements in Las Vegas. As originally recommended, the governor's 2025 CIP includes $71.2 million in general obligation bonds for the purchase and improvements of 5 office buildings for state office use in Las Vegas. On February 3rd, a budget amendment was submitted to request an additional $7.5 million in general fund appropriations to purchase 3 additional buildings to provide an intermediate care facility with 36 beds for youth needing specialized care. The 5 buildings originally recommended in this project to be purchased, and excluding the 3 buildings in the budget amendment, are near the state office buildings on the McCarran campus in Las Vegas. The purchase price of these buildings is has been confirmed at $52.5 million and includes estimated closing costs of approximately $570,000 for a total estimated purchase price of $53.1 million. The negotiated purchase price, according to the appraisal that we received a couple of days ago, is approximately $659,000 under the appraised value, but with additional closing costs added to the project, there is no potential cost savings from this project. The department indicates that the 5 buildings would be purchased in September of 2025. In addition to the purchase of these 5 buildings, this project would fund $5.7 million for building improvements and approximately $9 million for furniture, fixtures, and equipment. In regard to the budget amendment to CIP Project 25C26, the $7.5 million in general fund appropriations would fund the permanent relocation of youth from the DHHS West Charleston campus to 3 purchased buildings, which would provide the intermediate care beds for these youth needing specialized care. The executive branch indicated that if this project is approved, they would purchase the buildings from the campus from Hope Foundation, and the plan would be to have the building ready for occupancy by June 30th of 2027. Given the lack of information and details provided regarding the 3 buildings to be purchased from the campus of Hope Foundation, if the subcommittee wishes to approve the additional funding recommended through the budget amendment, it may wish to approve $7.5 million as a separate and distinct CIP project rather than consolidating this additional funding into CIP project 25C26. Taking a step back, I would note that the $7.5 million in general fund appropriation in the budget amendment was submitted without any documentation supporting the purchase price of these 3 buildings. By separating the 2 different scopes being recommended, this may allow for increased transparency and tracking of funds for the recommended purposes. So does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 25C26 as revised through the February 2nd, 2025 budget amendment, which adds $7.5 million in general fund appropriations to purchase 3 yet-to-be-constructed buildings and as reflected on the closing document? Or does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 25C26 as originally recommended by the governor that excludes the 3 yet-to-be purchased or constructed buildings? And if option 1 is recommended, does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of the budget amendment which adds $7.5 million in general fund appropriations to purchase 3 yet-to-be-constructed buildings as a separate CIP project?
Thank you so much. Does our members have any questions regarding this decision? Seeing none, I'll go to Chair Dondero Loop for a motion.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I would move to approve the CIP Project 25-C26 as revised through the February 2nd, 2025 budget amendment, which adds $7.5 million in general fund appropriations to purchase 3 yet-to-be-constructed buildings and as reflected on the closing statement. And I would move to also approve the budget amendment, which adds $7.5 million in general fund appropriations to purchase 3 yet-to-be-constructed buildings as a separate CIP project.
I have a first from Chair Dondero Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdigi. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Moving on to the top of page 31. The next project is 25C27, State Office Building Purchase in Reno. The governor recommends $24.2 million in general obligation bonds to purchase an office building for state use at 10375 Professional Circle Drive in Reno. The building is 79,248 square feet and was built in 2008. And it is as of June 15th, 2024, is occupied by the Department of Health and Human Service, Aging and Disability Services Division, and the Division of Public and Behavioral Health. If this project is approved, the division advises the planned purchase would occur between July 15th and September 30th of 2025. At the time of the governor's, the hearing on this project, we had not received an appraisal to evaluate the purchase price of the building. However, that appraisal was received a couple of days ago, and the appraised value is at $20 million without excluding the cost of closing. And therefore, the subcommittee could potentially consider a revision to this project and revise the purchase price to include estimated closing costs for a total of $20.2 million, which would reduce the the recommended purchase price of about $4 million as originally recommended in the governor's 2025 CIP. So does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 25C27 as reflected on the closing document, or does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of this project at a revised cost of $20.2 million with resulting in a reduction of $4 million in general obligation bonds?
Thank you so much. Do we have any questions regarding this project? We'll go ahead and take a motion.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I would move to approve CIP Project 25-C27 in the amount of $20.2 million.
I have a first from Chair Dondero Lupa, second from Majority Leader Howdigy. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Julie Waller again for the record. And the next project is a new project that was added through a budget amendment. This is Project 25C29 at CH47 storage hangar and site work at the Harry Reid Training Center for the Nevada Air National Guard instead. The governor recommends adding $21.7 million, consisting of $16 million in general obligation bonds and $5.7 million in federal funds, to construct a 27,715 square foot aircraft storage hangar, including site work for the Army Aviation Facility at the Harry Reid Training Center. The project scope would also include the demolition and repairs to the existing apron. After the CIP hearing on April 2nd, the agency indicated it would have 4 hangars available for aircraft storage after the completion of CIP Project 25C29 if approved, leaving 2 CH47 Chinooks uncovered on the parking apron. And I should note that there are a total of 5 Chinooks and I think it is 7 Black Hawk helicopters I have 5 Black Hawk helicopters and 7 CH-47 Chinook helicopters at this facility. And so with the approval of this project, that would leave 2 remaining Chinooks uncovered on the parking apron. So does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 25C29 funded with $16 million in general obligation bonds and $5.7 million in federal funds as added to the governor's recommended 2025 CIP through the March 18, 2025 budget amendment and as reflected on the closing document?
Thank you so much. Do we have any questions regarding this project? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and take a motion.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I would move to approve as read by staff.
Thank you so much. I have a first from Chair Dondero Lupa, second from Majority Leader Howdigy. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries. We'll go to our next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Julie Waller for the record. The next item is other construction projects, and I would point out that on attachment A, there are certain projects that are shaded in gray, and these projects have been heard during previous hearings, and based on that information provided during the budget hearings and the follow-up information provided to fiscal staff, there are no major issues identified with this subset of projects. And unless members would like to pull any of the shaded projects for discussion, fiscal staff would recommend that a single motion be taken for consideration on these projects at the end of this section. And I'll just briefly walk through the projects that are shaded on the attachment A for these construction projects. The first is 25C06. It's a parking expansion for the Nevada Air National Guard. The governor recommends $9.2 million, and this would consist of $235,660 in general obligation bonds and $8.9 million in federal funds to construct a concrete aircraft parking apron expansion at the Nevada Air National Guard's facility leased from the Reno Tahoe International Airport. The next project is 25C08, Cemetery Committal Building Utility Expansion, supplemental funding at the Northern Nevada Veterans Memorial Cemetery. The governor recommends $2.7 million in general obligation bonds to provide supplemental funding to support the continuation of Project 23C13, Committal Building, Northern Nevada Veterans Cemetery in Fernley. As background, this project was initially approved by the 2023 legislature with $3.5 million in general obligation bonds to design and construct a committal building at this cemetery in Fernley. This Project 25C08 would provide additional funding for power and utility extensions that were not identified in the development of the initial CIP construction project for the committal building. If approved, the division advises construction would begin in June of 2026 and the project would be completed in October of 2026. The next project is 25C10 Recreational Yards Upgrade Ely State Prison. The governor recommends $2.8 million in general obligation bonds to design and construct 4 security-grade fenced recreational yards with vehicle and pedestrian gates at housing units 1 through 8 and the addition of 3 basketball courts. The existing recreational yards are shared by multiple housing units at a time, and for security purposes, there is a need to separate the offender population into a more manageable number of offenders, which would also improve the safety of the correctional officers, staff, and other offenders. As of September 11th, the Ely State Prison was changed to a medium security institution, and during the hearing, the agency confirmed that the change in the security level of the institution was factored into the development of the project, and therefore no cost-saving modifications should be incorporated into the proposed budget. The next project is 25C11, Recreational Yard Enclosure Replacement at High Desert State Prison. The governor recommends $6.1 million in general obligation bonds to demolish 32 existing chain link recreation yard cages and construct 40 expanded metal recreational yard enclosures. The existing recreational yard enclosures can be compromised by offenders, which causes safety and security issues. The division indicates there are a total of 71 recreational yard enclosures. If approved, the division advises the design of this project would begin in December of 2025 and construction would begin in August of 2026, and the project is anticipated to be completed in January of 2027. The next project, 25C17, Central Services and Records Division Renovation, Department of Motor Vehicles in Carson City. The governor recommends $4.9 million in general obligation bonds with debt service to be repaid by the Highway Fund to design and construct an interior renovation to the DMV Central Services and Records Division in Carson City. The project would also repair flooring on the second level of the building that poses a significant safety hazard. The next project, 25C18, renovate customer counter casework, Department of Motor Vehicles at the Decatur location in Las Vegas. The governor recommends $1.9 million in general obligation bonds with debt service to be repaid by the Highway Fund to renovate the customer counters, replace millwork, and add a new desk station for inspectors at the Decatur DMV office in Southern Nevada. The justification indicates the cabinets are damaged and the countertops are broken and chipped, posing a safety hazard to customers and employees. The division indicates construction would be phased in coordination with DMV to allow for full operation during construction. The next project, 25C19, recreational yard enclosures at the Lovelock Correctional Center. The governor recommends $5.7 million in general obligation bonds to design and construct 28 recreational yard enclosures at the Lovelock Correctional Center. The existing chain link recreational yard enclosures are being compromised by offenders and need to be retrofitted and expanded with expanded metal mesh. The Lovelock Correctional Center houses an average of 1,600 offenders, and the division notes there are 14 existing recreational yard enclosures at this facility. Moving on to page 36, the next project, 25C20, is the evidence impound lot expansion at for the Department of Public Safety Training Division. The governor recommends $1.2 million in highway fund appropriations to design and construct a 15,600 square foot expansion to the existing evidence impound lot located at the southeast corner of the Department of Public Safety's Training Division parking lot in Carson City. And this evidence impound lot expansion would include security fencing, lighting, security cameras, a commercial carport, and a work shed. The evidence impound lot is utilized by the Nevada State Police to store vehicles that are involved in a fatal or felony serious bodily harm accidents that have at-fault drivers charged with a crime related to the accident. This particular impound lot receives vehicles that meet this criteria to be held as evidence from Carson, Churchill, Douglas, Lyon, Mineral, Pershing, Story, and Washoe counties. The current evidence impound lot is at its maximum capacity of 106 vehicles, and the number of vehicles impounded is increasing. Temporary lot has been added, however, because of the length of time DPS retains vehicles, this project is being recommended to construct an additional lot. If approved, the division advises that the design would begin in October 2025, construction would begin in August 2026, and the project would be completed November 2026. The next project, 25C21, exterior quad lighting at the Stewart facility, and the governor recommends general fund appropriations of $427,880 to design and construct pole-mounted light-emitting diode LED area lighting, poles, concrete bases, conduit wire, and trenching at Building 6 on the Stewart campus facility in Carson City. The next project, 25C22, Natural History Exhibit, Nevada State Museum, Carson City. The governor recommends general fund appropriations of $2.3 million for design and construction of a new 1,530 square foot natural history exhibit on the second floor of the Nevada State Museum in Carson City. The division notes that the second floor south gallery of the museum is currently classified as storage and as such lacks a mechanical design suitable for occupancy. If approved, the division advises the design of this project would begin in October 2025. Construction would begin in March of 2026, and the project is anticipated to be completed in August of 2027. And when asked if the museum anticipates any disruptions to the operation during construction, the agency indicated that no disruptions would occur as the second floor south gallery has been vacant for 30 years and had been previously used for exhibit storage. The next project, 25C23, construct North Street parking lot, Northern Nevada Adult Mental Health Services in Sparks. The governor recommends $1.1 million in general obligation bonds to design and construct a 100-space parking lot along North Street in Sparks. And this is a dirt area along North Street within the Northern Nevada Adult Mental Health Services campus where Building 9 previously stood. It's currently being used by employees and clients for parking. However, during winter weather, proper snow removal is not possible and such areas unusable during this time. That concludes the other construction projects, and so the decision for the subcommittee is, does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP projects 25C06, 25C08, 25C10, 25C11, and 25C17 through 25C23 as reflected on the closing document?
Thank you so much. Do we have any questions on any of these projects? Seeing none, I'll ask for a question. Motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I move to approve as read by staff.
Thank you so much. I have a first from Chair Darrell Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdicky. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries, and I wish I probably gave our staff a little breather, but not really, because we're now going to go into the planning projects. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Julie Waller for the record. We will now move to the planning projects that have been recommended by the governor, and that is on page 38. There are a total of 9 recommended planning projects for a total of $20.6 million. And those are all reflected again on attachment A, and there have been no projects identified for further discussion. So does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP projects 25P01 through 25P06 and 25P07 through 25P09 as reflected on the closing document?
Thank you so much. Do we have any questions regarding this decision item? Seeing none, I will accept a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and so moved as read by staff.
Thank you so much. I have a first from Chair Darrell Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdicky. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries, and I'll turn it back to Ms. Waller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I stand corrected. There is one planning project that we did pull out from Attachment A for further discussion, and this relates to the request to modify this project. This is Project 25P06, Advanced Planning Civil Service Team Facility in the Nevada Army National Guard. This project was originally recommended by the governor for $928,200, consisting of $338,200 in general fund appropriations and $590,000 in federal funds. And this would provide design through construction documents for an 8,240 square foot civil service facility on state property west of the Northern Nevada Correctional Center. This civil service team currently leases an office space and an adjacent garage and gated parking lot in Carson City. However, this leased building is surrounded by residential neighborhoods and is not secure. If approved, the design of this project will begin December 2025, would be completed in March of 2027, and the 2027 CIP request for construction is estimated at $10.8 million, and that is based on the 8,240 square foot size of the facility. On April 11th, the Governor's Office of Finance submitted a request to modify CIP Project 25P06, again, which would reduce the recommended general fund appropriations by $27,390 from the $338,200 as originally recommended to $310,810, and to increase the square footage of the planned facility from the 8,240 square feet to 26,143 square feet as requested. So does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 25P06 with $310,810 in general fund appropriations and $590,000 in federal funds, and an increase in the square footage of the planned facility from 8,240 square feet to 26,143 square feet as revised by the request received from the Governor's Finance Office on April 11th and as reflected on the closing document?
Thank you. Do we have any questions regarding this advanced planning project? Seeing none, I will accept a motion.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I would move to approve as read by staff.
Thank you so much. I have a first from Chair Dondera Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdigy. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Julie Waller for the record. Moving on to the top of page 39, and the maintenance projects that are recommended by the Governor in the 2025 CIP. There are 28 of these projects recommended for a total cost of $244.3 million, and they are reflected on the closing document table attachment A. And there are certain projects are shaded in grade, and based on the subcommittee's review of these projects during the hearings and follow-up information provided to staff, there are no major issues identified with this subset of projects. And unless members would like to pull any of the shaded projects for discussion, fiscal staff would recommend that a single motion be taken for consideration on these projects. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP projects 25M01 and 25M05 through 25M27 as reflected on the closing document?
With that, I will go ahead and accept a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So moved as read by staff.
I have a first from Chair Dondera Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdigy. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next maintenance projects that have been identified for discussion, there are 4 of them, and these are the maintenance projects that are developed under the consolidated project approach, which this includes the ability to address emergencies or contingencies that may arise, and the potential to fund priority 2 projects with any realized savings from priority 1 projects. Related to project 25M02, this is a project facility maintenance for the Department of Health and Human Services. The Governor recommends general fund appropriations of $22.5 million for the estimated cost of 17 individually identified projects to address the department's facility maintenance needs at locations statewide. Turning to page 40 is a table with the 17 individual sub-projects identified in this maintenance project. And I would point to the shaded line of 17, sub-project 25 MO217. This is a line item budgeted for emergent maintenance for the Department of Health and Human Services. And this project includes $570,312 for emergent maintenance projects. However, given under the consolidated maintenance approach, emergent projects would be funded with any available savings. The State Public Works Divisions indicated this line item has been included and is considered contingency funding to address maintenance needs as they arise. However, the CIP project cost already includes an approximate 10% contingency on every sub-project, and as previously noted, the premise of this approach for maintenance projects is to have the flexibility to address emergent projects through savings on completed projects or through the reprioritization of projects to address emergencies as they arise. Accordingly, it would appear that consolidated maintenance projects should not specifically include funding for emergent projects. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 25M02 as originally, or as reflected on the closing document? Or does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 25M02 with the elimination of $570,312 included in Subproject 25M0217 for emergent maintenance projects, given that project savings from Priority 1 projects may be used for emergent projects or Priority 2 projects?
Thank you, Ms. Waller. With that, any questions regarding this maintenance item? I will go ahead and take a motion from Chair Dondero Loop.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I would move to approve CIP Project 25-M02 with the elimination of the $570,312 included on Subproject 25-M02-17 for emergent maintenance projects, given that the project savings from Priority 1 projects may be used for emergent projects or Priority 2 projects.
Thank you so much. I have a motion from Chair Dondero Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdigy. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries. Let's go to the next maintenance item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next item is 25M03, Facility Maintenance, Department of Administration. This is also a maintenance project under the consolidated funding approach. And the governor recommends general fund appropriations of $18.9 million for the estimated cost of 11 individually identified projects to address the Department of Administration's facility maintenance needs at locations statewide. On the top of page 42, there are, as I mentioned, 11 Priority 1 sub-projects for this CIP Project 25M03. At the bottom of the table, Subproject 11 has been shaded gray for additional discussion, and it's a similar situation as the former project where this project is budgeting $570,312 for emergent maintenance. And as was previously noted, that this, under the consolidated project funding approach, that provides flexibility to use project savings to address emergent needs. So does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 25M03 as reflected on the closing document? Or does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 25M03 with the elimination of the $570,312 included in Subproject 25M0311 for emergent maintenance projects, given that project savings from Priority 1 projects may be used for emergent projects or Priority 2 projects?
Thank you so much. Do we have any questions regarding this maintenance item? Seeing none, I will go ahead and entertain a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I would move to approve CIP Project 25-M03 with the elimination of the $570,312 included in Subproject 25-M03-11 for emergent maintenance projects, given that project savings from Priority 1 projects may be used for emergent projects or Priority 2 projects.
Second. Thank you so much. I have a first from Chair Dondero Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdigy. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next project, 25M03H, Facilities Maintenance Department Administration. And this is a maintenance project for highway-funded facilities throughout the state in the Department of Administration maintenance needs. The governor recommends highway fund appropriations of $4.4 million for the estimated cost of 4 individually identified projects, which includes sub-project 4, with emergent maintenance of $114,062. Similar logic behind this, the consolidated funding approach should not budget for emergent needs, as there is flexibility to use the project savings to address these circumstances. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 25M03H as reflected on the closing document, or does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 25M03H with the elimination of $114,062 included in subproject 25M03H-04 for emergent maintenance projects, given that the priority 1 savings may be used for emergent projects or priority 2 projects?
Thank you so much, Ms. Waller. Any questions regarding this maintenance item? I'll go ahead and go to Chair Dondero Loop for a motion.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would move to approve CIP Project 25-M03H with the elimination of $114,062 included in subproject 25-M03H-04 for emergent maintenance projects, given that project savings from priority 1 projects may be used for emergent projects or priority 2 projects.
Thank you so much. I have a first from Chair Dondero Loop and a second from Majority Leader Howdigy. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries unanimously of those present. And I'll go back to Ms. Waller for the next maintenance item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is the last of the maintenance items here, and this is 25M04, Facility Maintenance Department of Corrections. The governor recommends general fund appropriations of $35.7 million for the estimated cost of 10 individually identified projects to address the Department of Corrections maintenance needs at its facilities throughout the state. This is also a project recommended under the consolidated approach. This is a new project that is recommended. Last session, it was just the Department of Health and Human Services and the Department of Administration. Through an internal or LCB audit, recommendation was to include a facility maintenance project for the Department of Corrections under the consolidated funding approach. On page 45, the table identifies the 10 sub-projects and includes a line item for $1.13 million to fund emergent maintenance projects, and that's subproject 10. And so does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 25M04 as reflected on the closing document, or does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of 25C or M04 with the elimination of $1.1 million included in subproject 25M0410 for emergent maintenance projects, given the project savings from priority 1 projects may be used for emergent projects or priority 2 projects?
Any questions on our last maintenance project? Seeing none, I'll take a motion.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I would move to approve CIP Project 25-M04 with the elimination of $1.1 million included in subproject 25-M04-10 for emergent maintenance projects, given that project savings from priority 1 projects may be used for emergent projects or priority 2 projects.
Thank you so much. I have a first from Chair Dondero Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdigy. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries unanimously with those present. We'll go back to Ms. Waller to go over statewide projects.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So on page 46, we are talking about statewide projects. There are 15 total statewide projects for a total cost of $59.6 million. 13 of these statewide projects have been traditionally funded in the CIP. There are 2 new statewide projects, one being the statewide elevator program and then an additional project for a statewide move program. The 14 of those statewide projects are shaded in the attachment A and have not been identified for additional discussion. So does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP projects 25S01 through 25S07H and 25S09?
I'll go ahead and take a motion.
So moved as read by staff.
Second. Perfect. I have a first from Chair Dondero Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdiggy. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next project is 25S10 statewide move program. This was the single statewide project identified for further discussion. The governor recommends general fund appropriations of $1.8 million for a new statewide move program to allow division staff to coordinate state office moves. The division advises it foresees continuing the statewide move program for the next several biennia. The project justification indicates the state agencies lack resources to effectively coordinate office space moves without division assistance. Relocating state agencies into new spaces is a logistically demanding process that requires a dedicated, highly technical employees to meet the agency's needs. The division currently meets this needs with professional level project management staff that is otherwise assigned to CIP projects. In testimony provided during the CIP hearing on February 20th, the division indicated several positions in the division assisted state agencies with office moves during the 23-24 interim. Further information provided after the budget hearing indicated that 16 professional positions funded by fees collected and charged to CIP projects within the engineering and planning budget account 1562, provided the assistance for these state agency office moves. However, the agency noted it is unable to quantify the hours these positions incurred assisting agency office moves, as it is unable to quantify the hours these positions incurred outside of CIP or agency projects. There's no mechanism to track that time. The division clarified that the $50 million appropriated in SB 456 from the 2023 session was available to assist state agencies to transition from remote work back to the office, and this funding was used to assist agencies with the cost of agency moves. However, these funds were not used to reimburse the division for staff time expended to assist these agencies. Given that 16 professional staff were directed to rededicate a portion of their work hours from managing CIP projects to instead assist agencies with office moves, and were charging these hours to CIP projects funded with various funding sources, when the positions were not working on those CIP projects, this practice appears to be an inappropriate use of funds within the engineering and planning budget account. Further, given that 16 professional staff who would normally be managing and working on CIP projects were redirected to provide assistance with agency office moves, the division was asked how the reduction in resources dedicated to managing these CIP projects were impacted, and how that impacted the implementation of the CIP. In response, the division stated the reduction in resources dedicated to CIP projects was commensurate with the time spent working on agency moves during the interim. However, as previously noted, the division is unable to quantify the time spent by professional staff to assist with state agency office moves. As previously noted in this closing document, the division is requesting that 20 active CIP projects otherwise set to expire at the end of FY25 be extended for an additional 2 years. It's unclear whether any of those project extensions requests are being made in part due to the redirection of division resources away from CIP project management and oversight. In regard to the positions that would be supported through the funding recommended in this project, the division was asked to clarify the number and type of positions. In response, the division indicated there would be a total of 4 positions, including 1 construction project coordinator 3 and 3 construction project coordinator 1 positions. Initially, the recommendation was for 5 positions, but the division now indicates the project would support 4 positions if approved. During the 23-24 interim, the division reclassified 4 vacant building construction inspector 3 positions to construction project coordinator positions. These were approved in October of 2024 and did not require the IFC approval as both position types are in the same occupational group. Turning to the top of page 48, there are the duties that are outlined for these two position types. And according to the State Public Works Division, the division's plan for these four positions when CIP Project 25S10 expires at the end of 4 years would be to transition support to the completion of other CIP projects funded by assessments to CIP projects. In lieu of providing general fund appropriations through CIP Project 25S10 to support agency office moves, the subcommittee may wish to direct the State Public Works Division to request reimbursement for staff time that may be expended on agency office moves through the one-time funding specifically appropriated in SB 452, which is the bill that requests an extension of the reversion of those unexpended funds from SB 456, or some other legislation for costs associated with agencies' return to the office, if approved. Alternatively, if division staff is providing time and effort for the relocation of a state agency, the State Public Works Division could charge that state agency directly for services provided, which would be similar to and in alignment with how the Building and Grounds section of the division charges agencies to complete tenant improvements. Any staff time expended by positions supported through assessments to CIP projects on agency office moves should not be a charge against a CIP project unrelated to an agency office move. The subcommittee may wish to recommend the issuance of a letter of intent to the State Public Works Division to direct the agency to track time and effort of staff allocated to agency office moves to request reimbursement for such staff time from the one-time funding appropriated in SB 452 or any other legislation that appropriates funding for such purposes, and to implement a process to directly charge state agencies for time and effort of providing services to facilitate office moves. Further, the letter of intent should clarify that the State Public Works Division not continue the practice of funding staff time and effort that is unrelated to CIP or agency capital projects for agency moving efforts with fees and assessments collected from various funding sources as direct charges to unrelated CIP or agency projects.
Thank you so much. With that,
On the top of, sorry,
sorry,
Madam
I'm so
Chair, I
sorry.
was gonna just point out that your motion is listed for you on the top of page 49, and that would be to either approve the project as recommended by the governor, recommended the issuance of a letter of intent to direct the State Public Works Division to track the staff time allocated to agency staff moves and request reimbursement from any approved one-time funding, and to implement a process to directly charge state agencies for time and effort providing services to facilitate office moves, and to not charge the staff time against fees or assessments collected from charges to a CIP or agency project that is unrelated to an agency office move.
thank you so much. With that, are there any questions regarding this decision? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and take a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I would move to not approve the CIP Project 25-S10 funded with $1.8 million in general fund appropriations as recommended the governor, but I would move to approve the issuance of a letter of intent to direct the State Public Works Division to track staff time allocated to agency office moves to request reimbursement for such staff time for any approved one-time funding specifically appropriated to assist with agencies return to the office or office moves, to implement and begin a process to directly charge state agencies for time and effort of providing services to facilitate office moves, and to not charge this staff time against fees or assessments collected from charges to a CIP or agency project that is unrelated to the agency office move.
Thank you so much. I have a first from Chair Dondera Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdigy. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries. And we are to our last decision item. Thank you, Ms. Waller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That concludes our discussion of the individual CIP projects recommended by the governor. And now at the bottom of page 49, there's a discussion of a financing option for the revised 2025 CIP. As indicated in the Treasurer's General Obligation Debt Capacity and Affordability Report for the 25-27 biennium, the Treasurer has identified $276.3 million of bond affordability not recommended by the Governor for the 2025 CIP, which could be considered by the Legislature to support additional programs or capital improvement projects. The Governor's proposed 2025 CIP, as revised, is recommended to be funded through various funding sources, including general obligation bonds, federal funds, agency funds, and general fund appropriations, as well as highway fund appropriations. As such, the subcommittee may wish to consider financing projects with an estimated life of 20 years or more, which are currently recommended to be financed with general fund appropriations with general obligation bonds up to and including the remaining general obligation bond authority available for the 2025-27 biennium, considering the action taken by the subcommittee in closing the CIP for the legislative branch, which was not included in the Governor's recommended 2025 CIP. Subcommittee could then choose to offset general fund appropriations in a commensurate amount, which would result in general fund appropriations that could be redirected to support other legislative priorities or just be budget savings. The State Public Works Division has identified several CIP projects recommended in the Governor's revised 2025 CIP that do have a useful life of 20 years or more, which are currently recommended to be funded with general fund appropriations. And fiscal staff has outlined these projects that are identified in the following table, and they're based on project number and order from which the subcommittee could choose to revise the recommended funding source from general fund appropriations to general obligation bonds in order to generate savings. That table is found on page 50. There are a total, general fund appropriations for these projects that are recommended to be funded with general fund that do have a useful life of 20 years or more is about $147.1 million. Turning to page 51, options for the subcommittee to consider would be to, the subcommittee may wish to consider the following option related to the recommended funding sources for a portion of the support of the revised 2025 CIP. Dollar amounts, I would note the dollar amounts listed in the previous table are subject to change dependent on closing action of the subcommittee in approving, modifying, or not approving individual projects as presented on the closing table. So the subcommittee could consider recommending approval of additional state general obligation bonds not to exceed $147.2 million in support of a portion of the costs of the revised 2025 CIP. And if the subcommittee makes this recommendation, it would result in general fund savings of $147.2 million if all projects recommended by the Governor, inclusive of the amendments, are recommended for approval. If the subcommittee recommends approval of the issuance of general obligation bonds of up to $147.2 million to support the revised 2025 CIP, fiscal staff would request authority to make adjustments to individual project state funding sources, including the projects identified above, and would present the funding source changes as part of the subcommittee's recommendations to the joint full committees to account for all the subcommittee's recommendations and to identify the final general fund savings that could be realized.
Thank you so much, Ms. Waller. And I'm not sure if anyone will have any questions, but we'll go ahead and take a motion on this item.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I would move to approve as read by staff.
Thank you so much. We have a first from Chair Dondero Lupa, second from Majority Leader Howdiggy. Is there any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, I will go first to Assemblymember Haven.
Thank you, Chair. In just looking at the list, there are some items in here that concern me that may not have a useful life of 20 years. I'll go ahead and support this, but I do want to spend some more time looking at this further because I do have some concerns that we may be paying for this after the actual useful life.
Thank you for your comment. Any other comments or questions regarding the motion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries. And I just really want to thank our staff for all of these items that they went through and prepare, obviously, our documents, and lots of talking today. It's very appreciated. So with that, we are going to our last item on our agenda, which is public comment. I'll go ahead and start here in Carson City.
Good morning, Kent Irvin, ERVIN, for the Nevada Faculty Alliance, the independent voice of NSHE professional employees. The revenue forecast from today's economic forum is likely to be dire. Despite the sunshine outside, it's looking like a rainy day. You are making very difficult decisions. Nevertheless, it is my job, literally, to ask that budget issues not be fixed on the backs of state employees. GovRec had new spending and some bad math. Fundamentally, GovRec failed to protect the state workforce. State employees are Nevadans working to provide essential services for Nevadans, and they contribute to the state economy. NSHE professional employees do not have collective bargaining in statute, so effectively we can't negotiate overcompensation. Hence, we are here begging. Inflation is running at 2.5% to 3% and may rise because of new federal taxes on imported goods. With the 1.75% increase in retirement contributions for regular employees, take-home pay will decline even before considering inflation. That needs to be fixed. For the NSHE budget meeting tomorrow, our priorities are everything still in option 3 from the work session, and 1, addressing campus security, 2, addressing wraparound student services as identified as a need by the Interim Funding Study Committee. 3, addressing the budget holes created by the funding of historic catch-up cost of living adjustments in the last session. And 4, COLAs for the next biennium to keep from losing those gains. In addition, the nursing education expansion from last session is being implemented and needs to be continued. Thank you so much.
Hello, Madam Chairs and members of the committee. My name is Jana Moan, and I'm here on behalf of the Nature Conservancy in Nevada. And I just wanted to come up here and say thank you so much for recommending approval of the conservation bonds that DCNR put forth. This funding has done so much to support nature and communities and culture in our state, and we really look forward to seeing it be put to good use in the next biennium. So thank you so much for your support and for your service on this committee, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. We'll go to Las Vegas, and we'll start there with public comment.
Doug Unger, D-O-U-G, U-N-G-E-R, UNLV Chapter President, Nevada Faculty Alliance. Amid the unforeseen, chaotic uncertainty afflicting the general fund budget affecting every citizen of our state, this subcommittee must make difficult, unenviable decisions. Please know how much I and our NFA members respect and appreciate the care and discernment with which you make these hard choices. Notwithstanding, as you set the NSHE budget, I implore you to please consider the governor's recommended one-shot funding and possibly even more to improve campus safety. Following the December 6, 2023 mass shooting on the UNLV campus that murdered 3 faculty, those of us working on campus safety and security issues have learned a lot. Active shooters now assail a school, college, or university in our nation with a regularity like seasonal catastrophes. Nevada's campuses are not yet as safe as they should be from this violence. UNLV has done what it can, reported our expenditures between 4 and 5 million, but it's not enough. Our NSHE schools can't do it on their own, not when federal cuts are at least 40 million so far and still counting. We need camera systems with centralized monitoring, digital upgrades, increased numbers of campus police, renovations to buildings and public spaces, and doors to classrooms that lock from the inside so our teachers don't risk their lives by having to step out into halls to lock doors behind them. God forbid we should suffer such violence again, but I fear it's only a matter of time. Please consider campus safety funding the urgent capital improvement that it is, and one that can save lives. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll go to our phone lines. AVH, do we have anyone on the phone lines wishing to give public comment this morning?
To provide public comment, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue.
Amy Payson, AMY, PASON, for the Nevada Faculty Alliance. We do not envy you the hard budget decisions you have to make this session, especially with the unprecedented and unpredictable economic environment we find ourselves. You would not envy the hard decisions faculty are making in the departments of our NC campuses as we are preparing for more hiring freezes on top of the loss of grant-funded workers. As reported today, UNR and UNLV stand to lose about $39 million and counting in grant-funded money. That's money that pays for workers, including our graduate assistant stipends. In my own department, we are deciding which classes are absolutely essential to offer to not impede our student graduation, which means reducing elective course options. We are trying to weigh whether we can continue offering concurrent enrollment courses to support our Nevada high schoolers when we do not have enough faculty to teach our on-campus college students. How much can we expect our majors to take courses online from adjunct instructors who live in other states? Because we've been holding full-time faculty positions open since the COVID budget cuts. How much can we continue to advise students by faculty in our department who know our students best when we also contemplate faculty teaching overloads to ensure courses are taught? Some departments are contemplating whether we should limit enrollment in graduate programs or discontinue some degree paths altogether if we cannot offer the courses students would need to complete those programs. If NC's budget relies, in part, on student enrollment, can we weather reduced enrollments when we have reduced offerings and services? I'm finishing my 15th year teaching at UNR. I have been serving our students through more bad budget years than good. We know the state budget is often balanced at the expense of higher education, but in this bad budget year, cutting costs will be at the expense of our students and in ways I do not believe we will be able to recover from. Thank you for your consideration of the NC budgets tomorrow.
Thank you. Do we have any other callers?
Chair, there are no additional callers for public comment.
Thank you so much. And with that, that will conclude our meeting this morning.